Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and as this article from Financial Times says, China stocks suffer worst one-day sell-off in 17 months, and this is a big story as the article kind of goes into. China's blue chip index suffered its worst one-day fall in 17 months on Thursday as investors cited rising bond yields and tough new regulations targeting corporate debt for scaling back their exposure to equities after strong performance this year. And there's a lot more to go into in this, but John, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, well, as this Zero Hedge article here says that I'm looking at as well, it says China stock rout resumes as top fund sees high probability of bond carnage. What we're seeing in China, and we talked about this before, the problems with mass debt accumulation that is happening in China, and also it's the same story wherever you look today. There's another article that I can talk about that says the 35 of the top exchanges in the world are highly overvalued in like on a global scale. And it's the biggest rally ever since 2007 of all these exchanges together. Well, since 2007, we all know what happened the year after, right?
Well, we're seeing a lot of patterns like that lately, basically all over the world, and it's something that people should be concerned about because we so often say, because we get a lot of comments, well, you guys have been saying that this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Well, the thing is we never put a date on it because the fact of the matter is the fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in both the markets and the monetary system, which makes it impossible for us to say this is the day it's going to happen. But we know it's going to happen, and that's why we want people to be educated about it so that they can prepare themselves, whether it all comes down in the next year or 5 years.
Yeah, well, the thing is here, when you look at all the numbers from China, we could look at consumer credit, household credit, we could look at business credit. All of what it shows is this massive growth in China has been all fueled by a massive debt output by everybody's getting indebted. Of course, China has a large population, so it can go on for a long time.
The biggest population in the world, other than India, is in second place.
Well, I want to go back to 1024 and what happened with the Sung Dynasty when they started to look at fiat currency and they issued credit as well. They had a middle class that was booming at that time. Well, middle class sounds familiar, doesn't it? But that was 1,000 years ago. The reason why that happens is because you have this massive influx of people that didn't have access to credit that gets the credit, and now they have more things. But when you look at the way you're getting portrayed, for example, your assets that they look at when you go to the bank, they don't look very much at the liabilities, how much you actually owe on them. There's how much assets do you have. So they don't look at all the debt that is owed, really. That is the liabilities. And when you look at those two combined, it's not very, you don't really have very much asset at all until things are not an asset until you sell it. That's what people got to understand. You can hold an asset, which is fantastic. It could be stock, bond, whatever it is.
Assets are a good way to avoid all the massive taxation we see too.
Yeah, and an asset is... I think things are not really, like you can say that it's an asset, but it's not really an asset until you've been able to sell it for a profit and you actually have that money or whatever it is that you get in return in exchange in your hands. That's when it's a real proper asset that have done its way of, going to invest in it. But what we're seeing is this Chinese mountain of credit that is accumulating right now. And it's not stopping. It's just going like full force, full speed. It's like a bullet train that is going towards a massive center block wall. And who knows? We all know what's going to happen with that.
Can you go into a bit of the stats you have there, John?
Yeah. Well, I said the consumer credit. I'm looking at that right now. Consumer credit is up 600% since 2010. We can go and look at the government debt since 2008. It's up about almost doubled. You can look at China's household debt to GDP, and when you look at it has risen as well quite substantially. It's gone up 10%. And then the loans to banks, which is the public bank of China's loans to the banks, that has gone up 300%. And also we can take a look at the balance sheet of public bank of China, which has gone up over 120% since 2008. This is all warning signs, and you've seen it in the bond. They're talking about the bond carnage here, which is the sell-off that is happening in bonds. It's a warning sign that people are wanting to exit out of these companies, out of this heavily accumulating debt, and people that would not be able to pay back that debt, so they want to exit out of those investments. And people are also exiting in mass now. You see it in the stock market, so it's bleeding in everywhere in China. People are afraid that it's going to turn into a mass carnage, and
I think they're right to be afraid. And John, what does this all mean going forward for people living in China?
Well, it means that the people of China got to understand that this is nothing more than what's been happening in the West over the last, the 40-something years when we went on a full fiat standard. It's the same kind of thing. And Chinese, I don't know if the Chinese monetary historians, I would love to, if there's any Chinese monetary historians that would like to come on our show, I would love to sit down and, really talk about what happened back in the old days versus what they see today, and kind of make the connections.
And the lack of understanding that's risen out of that, considering over almost 1,000 years since 1024 AD, and people still haven't learned about why fiat currency, which is printed out of thin air, debt devaluing the currency, massive amounts of inflation, the hidden tax, how people still haven't figured out that fiat is always going to revert to its intrinsic value of zero, always has, always will. When will people learn? But instead, they make these issues seem complicated when they really aren't that complicated. They're very basic, but they make it seem complicated with tricky words and lingo and push people away from it, and it intimidates people, and therefore they don't learn about it. So this issue, money, which is one of the most important things to understand in the world, people, the vast majority don't understand a thing about it. And I think that that's a very telling sign of how we are being controlled and led to the slaughter.
Yeah, well, the powers that be definitely want that to happen. And I'm going to read out of an article that I have here that I mentioned about the potential bond carnage that could come. Some sleuthing on the part of Wall Street Journal discovered that the most likely explanation was that redemption in China's shadow banking sector, especially in the infamous $4 trillion wealth management products, the WMP, meant that cash needed to be raised quickly. Highly liquid government bonds were the easiest option. Furthermore, retaining the higher yield corporate bonds was handy in meeting the guaranteed returns in the WMP Ponzi scheme. So what you're seeing here is a rapid rise in bond pricing because people are desperate or trying to get out. And the shadow banking sector in China, not too many people have talked about it. It's all this hidden debt and accumulation of derivatives that have happened over time, and also in Europe and in the United States. This whole scheme of shadow banking, hiding everything off the bank's books, so the bank doesn't look bad when you look at it directly. But if you actually had the chance to look in those hidden books, they call it off the books, right? In those hidden entities that are hidden off the books, the special purpose vehicles and special purpose entities that are hidden off the books, you would see that China is as bad off as the rest of the world. You got to understand, of course, the public bank of China has been accumulating mass amounts of gold. They probably have somewhere between 4 to, they say officially, just a couple of thousand tons, but you're looking at least 4,000 to 8,000 tons that they have. No gold is leaving China ever. I think this is going to come down to a big crash. All over the world, they think that China is going to be the new reserve currency. Now, I think the SDR is going to come in, and China wants to be the one on the top.
Well, that's
leading the pack.
That's what I wanted to go into with this, John, is that there's this massive power shift happening, and there's this push for the centrally planned cashless society, which we are seeing China champion alongside India and Australia to a lesser degree, and Sweden to a lesser degree, Canada, the United States under when you look at M0, it's pretty obvious that there is a shift happening. But China has been on top of this. The IMF has said that they wanted to move to Beijing in the coming years, and the IMF is pushing forward this SDR, special drawing rights, with the cashless, coinciding with cashless currency and centrally planned, that is. That's very important to point out. And I think that there's a massive shift happening, and that's what people have to be worried about because, people are swapping out of the US dollar, and rightly so. I mean, it's a terrible currency to be involved in. All fiat currency, like I said, reverts to its intrinsic value of zero. But the United States Federal Reserve wants to push interest rates up just enough to be able to drop them out when it crashes, which it will crash. But the problem is that they have to go into negative territory at the rate they're going at now, because in, I believe, 2012, from 2008 to 2012 or something like that, it was about a 5.5% drop in the interest rates. And this time it's going to take a lot bigger of a drop, and it's going to go negative.
The average is about 4 to 5%. So that's why exactly.
So they're getting desperate, and they want to push towards this system as fast as they possibly can. But the thing is, are they really accounting for the fact that China is just vastly just consumed, drowning in debt? I mean, the amount of debt in China is astronomical,
but it's not that high compared to other countries. But it's astronomical because of the population.
That's what I mean, and it's a terrible thing. So one has to wonder: is this all going to be coming down by design, or is this all going to be coming down, and kind of play into our hands if we're educated enough to get around it?
Well, we've had several people I've seen been commenting about the special drawing rights, about the yuan, the dollar, and everybody being in the basket of currencies that they use to value the SDR. I don't think they're going to care about the valuation of SDRs through other currencies when it all comes to push comes to shove, and the whole crisis comes to be. It's going to be just the SDR, and then you're going to have these devalues. Some people believe that we're going to trade SDRs as peasants. It's never going to happen. It's for they said it in their own books. They said it's for the multilateral corporations and for the countries to trade in between each other. What we're going to have on our hands is severely devalued Argentinian, Bulgarian style devalued currencies on our hands, which have been devalued 75, 80, who knows how many percent. And then suddenly all the money that we thought we had in these dollars, these kroners, this whatever currency you have, suddenly overnight when these crises, they freeze everything, and then the crisis happens, suddenly you sit with nothing left, and what you saved up for the whole your whole life savings just become worth almost nothing. And this has happened so many times throughout history. When are we going to learn? I talked to so many people that this will happen to, Josh.
Well, I mean, pensions gone, bail-in regimes run amok, the cashless system, especially with bail-in regimes. Like, what are you going to do? You can't do a run on a bank if there's nothing in the bank, really. It's all just digital. And already, as it is, only 3% of the US dollar is actually printed on paper. The rest is digital already. And as I so often say, if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's a bank's. And if your money's always going through the banks via digital transactions, legal tender laws, you don't hold it in your hands, it's never yours, it's always a bank's, and that means you are essentially enslaved to the banking system. And what are you going to do about it once push comes to shove? We have to actually understand this now so we can get prepared, be over-prepared rather than under-prepared. It's always the better way to go. And for that, I guess we can go into some solutions, which is the usual food, water, shelter, self-defense, so you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Then there's decentralized Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, gold, silver. Get out of the system. That's the point.
Yeah, and also looking at China. China is one of the least centralized agricultural economies in the world. They need to keep that going and need to be self-sufficient because China currently wants, of course, what the United States have, which is one of the most centralized agricultural economies in the world, controlled by a cartel.
Absolutely. So with that said, I guess we could wrap it up there. There's so much to talk about here, but as per usual, check our channel out. We have a lot of stuff on this going back a couple years now, and it's important to understand in order to be the change we wish to see, because we have to turn the negatives into a positive as individuals, not giant coercive collectives, and depend on the government or the banking system to save us, because they're the ones causing the problem in the first place. So
Exactly.
we have to be independent folks and responsible, financially responsible and self-sustainable. So until next time, thanks for going into this with us, John, and we'll see you next time. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth,
Be the change.
Like what you see here at WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the Anti-Defamation League comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post via Steem, the cryptocurrency. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And don't forget to come on down to Anarchapulco in Acapulco, Mexico in February, one of the best events of the year, and you can save money on your tickets by typing in promo code WAM. That's WAM. We'll leave the link below for you, and until next time, don't forget to subscribe. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.